The whole royal court had gathered to witness the wolfless girl be dismissed like a stain from the kingdom's bloodline. And Elara Rowan knew, the moment the silver doors opened, that no mercy waited on the other side. The Hall of Crowns stretched before her in a long path of black stone, moonlit banners, and carved wolf skulls mounted above the pillars, each one watching her with empty bone eyes, as if even the dead had come to judge her. She walked barefoot because the guards had taken her shoes at the gate, saying a girl without a wolf had no right to step into the Alpha King's hall as if she belonged among wolves. Her gray dress was still damp from the winter rain. Her wrists were bound with ceremonial silver, not tight enough to cut, but cold enough to burn a warning into her skin. On either side of her, nobles stood in layered furs and iron circlets, whispering behind their hands. They did not whisper her name. They whispered what she was not. Not shifted, not scented, not bonded, not blessed. Wolfless, empty. A mistake the moon had forgotten to finish. At the end of the hall, on a throne carved from the ribs of an ancient white wolf, sat Alpha King Kalen Vare, ruler of the Ebonfang Kingdom, conqueror of the northern marches, breaker of 3 rebel packs, and the most feared Alpha alive. His black hair fell to his shoulders like wet raven feathers. His crown was a circle of dark iron and moonstone, and his eyes were the pale gold of a predator that had learned to stop trusting anything that trembled. The court had brought Elara before him because the old moonrite demanded every unmated woman of royal blood, noble blood, healer blood, or pack-born blood stand beneath the lunar arch when the king searched for the mate who would strengthen his throne. Elara had not wanted to come. She had hidden in the herb cellars when the soldiers arrived in Ashfin. But the council said all pack-born daughters must be counted, even the broken ones, and so she had been dragged across 3 valleys to be displayed before a king who looked at her as though her very existence insulted the order of his world. The high healer, Marwyn Corvain, stood at his right hand in white robes stitched with silver thread. Her face was calm, almost kind, but her eyes did not leave Elara's wrists. "Your Majesty," Marwyn said, her voice carrying through the hall with the softness of a blade sliding free. "This is Elara Rowan of Ashfin, 21 years of age. No wolf manifestation, no scent marking, no traceable mate pulse. Her pack requests formal release from responsibility." A murmur passed through the court. Formal release meant exile. It meant a pack could say, before the crown and moon, that a person was not worth sheltering. Kalen's gaze moved over Elara once, cold and dismissive, until it reached her face. Something flickered there. Not recognition, not kindness, something stranger. For one heartbeat, the great hall seemed to hold its breath. The candles bent toward her, though there was no wind. Somewhere beneath the floor, a wolf growled so faintly Elara thought she had imagined it. Kalen's hand tightened on the arm of his throne, and his jaw flexed as if pain had struck him behind the ribs. Then, the moment vanished. His expression hardened. "Why is she standing in my hall?" he asked. "Because the moonrite requires," Marwyn began. "The moon does not require mockery," Kalen cut in. His voice was low, but it carried like thunder over snow. A woman with no wolf cannot answer a king's bond. Elara felt the words land across her skin. She had heard cruelty before. In Ashfin, children had howled behind her back. Women had pulled their sons away from her shadow. Men had refused to eat bread she touched, fearing emptiness could spread like rot. But there was a difference between being unwanted in a poor mountain pack and being named useless by a king before half a kingdom. She lifted her chin, not because she was unhurt, but because her mother had taught her one rule before dying. When wolves bare their teeth, never offer them your throat. Kalen saw the movement. His eyes narrowed. "You stand proudly for someone who carries nothing." A few nobles laughed. Lady Vespera Morcant, the richest Luna candidate in the court, smiled behind a jeweled fan. Elara's cheeks burned, but she did not look away. "I was ordered to stand, Your Majesty," she said. Her voice was quiet, rough from disuse, but clear. Pride had nothing to do with it. The laughter stopped. For the first time, Kaelin leaned forward. The air shifted. Every wolf-blooded person in the hall felt the pressure of him, that invisible command born from alpha power, the kind that made weaker wolves lower their eyes before their minds chose obedience. Elara felt it too, but differently. It did not press on a wolf inside her. It pressed against an emptiness she had carried all her life, and the emptiness did not move. Kaelin noticed. His nostrils flared. A whisper traveled through the court. She does not submit, because there is nothing in her to submit. Marwen's mouth tightened. Perhaps the girl should be removed before the rite begins. But Kaelin rose from the throne. The court fell silent. He descended the steps one by one, tall and dangerous in black armor beneath his royal cloak, until he stood close enough for Elara to see the silver scar that crossed the base of his throat. It looked old, but not healed. It pulsed faintly beneath the skin. He looked down at her bound wrists, then at her face. "The kingdom calls me cruel," he said softly. "They are wrong. Cruelty is wasting hope where none can grow." Elara swallowed. The silver on her wrist suddenly felt colder. Kaelin turned so the entire court could hear him. "By my command, Elara Rowan of Ashfin is released from the Moonrite. No alpha is bound to offer her protection. No pack is bound to claim her. No court is bound to feed her. Let the record show that a wolfless girl cannot stand as candidate, companion, healer, or mate to the throne." His eyes returned to her, merciless and bright. A king has no use for empty blood. The words should have broken her. Perhaps they did, but not in the way anyone expected. Elara's shame moved through her, hot and sharp, and beneath it something ancient, stirred like a sleeping thing turning under ice. The silver cuffs around her wrists did not merely burn. They rang. The sound was soft, almost musical, but every candle in the hall went blue. From the far end of the chamber, where the lunar arch stood behind the throne, a single moonstone cracked from top to bottom. Gasps scattered through the court. Kaelin's face changed. For the briefest moment, his eyes flashed not gold, but the deep, wounded amber of something trapped behind them. His wolf. Elara felt it before she understood it. A presence inside the king, starving and furious, lifting its head toward her like a dying beast scenting water. Then Marwen stepped between them, her white sleeve cutting across Elara's vision. "The girl carries bad omens," the high healer said quickly. "Remove her." The guard seized Elara's arms. She did not fight. She looked once at the cracked moonstone, then once at the Alpha King, who had just cast her out before his kingdom. Kaelin stood motionless, one hand pressed beneath his ribs, as though something inside him had reached for her and been dragged back into darkness. By the time the doors slammed shut behind Elara, rain was falling over the palace courtyard in silver sheets, and the court was already trying to convince itself nothing had happened. But before dawn, the Alpha King woke screaming, and his wolf did not answer him. Elara had spent her life learning how to become small without disappearing. In Ashfen, that skill had kept her alive. The mountain pack occupied a hard strip of land, where black pines clawed at the sky and winter lasted long enough to teach children hunger before they learned songs. Every child born there was taken beneath the full moon at 7 days old, so the pack seer could mark the first sign of the wolf soul. Some babies cried when moonlight touched them. Some bared toothless gums. Some carried a faint warmth beneath the breastbone where the wolf slept until the first shift. Elara had done none of those things. Her mother had held her under the open sky, while the pack seer pressed 2 fingers to the infant's chest and waited. The moon passed behind a cloud. The candles blew out. No wolf answered. From that night onward, Ashvin treated Elara as if she were a living absence. They did not hate her at first. Hatred would have required belief that she possessed enough power to offend. They pitied her, which was worse, because pity hardened into resentment every time she survived something they thought should have broken her. When other children began hearing their wolves in dreams, Elara heard only silence. When girls her age learned to run on 4 legs beneath the birches, Elara remained human, carrying baskets of yarrow, moonwort, and bitter root for the pack infirmary. She learned where fever settled in the skin. She learned which leaves drew poison from wounds. She learned that pain changed shape depending on whether the wounded expected comfort or punishment. Animals trusted her more than people did. Injured ravens let her bind their wings. A half-starved fox once crept into her shed and placed its bleeding paw in her lap. Even wolves, real wolves, the wild kind without human minds inside them, sometimes watched her from the tree line without growling. But no one called that magic. They called it proof that lesser creatures knew their own. Her mother, Ceres Rowan, had been the only person who touched Elara without hesitation. Ceres had been a quiet woman with silver-threaded black hair and hands that always smelled of crushed herbs. She never spoke of Elara's father. She never spoke of the old blood that slept in their family. But some nights, when Elara woke from dreams of white wolves walking across black water, she would find her mother sitting beside the hearth, staring at the moon through the smoke hole with terror in her eyes. "If they ever call you empty," Ceres once whispered, "let them. Empty cups survive where full ones are spilled." Elara had not understood. Then, when she was 14, Ashvin's alpha returned from a border fight with silver poison in his veins. The pack healer failed. The seer failed. Men began digging a grave beneath the old pine. Ceres went to the alpha's chamber at midnight and ordered Elara to stay outside. Through the door, Elara heard a wolf howl as if the moon had been torn from the sky. She heard her mother chanting in a language no one in Ashvin spoke anymore. At dawn, the alpha lived. Ceres did not. The pack called it sacrifice. The healer called it foolishness. The seer burned Ceres's few books before Elara could read them. After that, people watched Elara differently, not with respect, with suspicion, as if they feared whatever had killed her mother might someday wake inside the wolfless daughter. Years passed. No wolf came. No power came. Only the silence remained, vast and faithful. Elara made herself useful because usefulness was safer than hope. She mended wounds after training bouts. She carried water for birthing mothers. She sat with dying elders whose families could not bear to watch the final breath. She did not ask to belong. She only asked not to be thrown away. But Ashvin had suffered 2 poor winters, and a pack under pressure always searched for the weakest bone to break. When the royal summons arrived declaring that Alpha King Kalin would reopen the ancient moon rite to find a Luna capable of stabilizing the realm, Ashvin sent its noble daughters first. Then the council's riders asked for every unmated pack-born woman. Elara's name appeared on the list because someone in the records had marked her mother as healer blood. Ashvin's alpha smiled when he handed her over. "Perhaps the king will find a use for oddities," he said. "If not, at least the crown will witness what we have endured." Elara understood then. They were not sending her to be chosen. They were sending her to be rejected officially, so Ashvin could wash its hands of her without offending the moon laws. During the journey to the capital, she rode in the supply cart, while noble candidates traveled in covered carriages perfumed with rose oil and winter mint. Lady Vesper Morcant, with her perfect bronze hair and snow-white wolf, leaned from her carriage one afternoon and asked whether wolfless girls dreamed like real women or simply lay cold until morning. Elara did not answer. She was busy wrapping a torn paw for one of the escort hounds. The hound licked her wrist. Vespera laughed as if the sight proved something. At the palace, Elara was bathed in water too hot, dressed in gray because the attendant said no royal color should be wasted on her, and bound in silver so no one could accuse the court of taking chances with defective blood. She had expected shame. She had not expected the Alpha King to notice her. She had not expected the candles to turn blue. She had not expected the dying thing inside him to look through his eyes and recognize her. That recognition followed her after the guards threw her from the palace gate into the rain. It followed her down the white stone steps as the moon vanished behind storm clouds. It followed her into the lower city, where wolves in human skin hurried past with cloaks over their heads and looked away from the barefoot girl wearing broken silver cuffs. By midnight, Elara had reached the old market district below the palace cliffs. She had no coin, no pack claim, no shelter. The royal decree had stripped all three from her, with one sentence. She found refuge beneath the collapsed awning of a candle seller's stall, curled her burned wrists beneath her arms, and tried not to replay Kaelin's words. A king has no use for empty blood. The strange thing was, beneath the hurt, beneath humiliation so deep it made breathing difficult, Elara felt something else. Not anger. Not yet. A thread. Thin, silver, and impossible, stretched from somewhere behind her ribs toward the palace above. Every few moments, it pulled. Every time it did, she heard a faint sound that was not in the street around her. A wolf, panting in pain. By dawn, the palace had sealed itself in silence. Servants carried breakfast trays that returned untouched. Guards changed shifts without speaking. In the inner chambers behind the throne room, Alpha King Kaelin Vare stood naked to the waist before a mirror of polished obsidian and tried to summon his wolf. Nothing happened. No surge of heat beneath the skin. No crack of bone. No dark fur rising across his arms. No second heartbeat answering his own. Only pain. It spread from the scar at his throat down into his chest. A slow, cold burning that made his hands curl against the table. Behind him, high heeler Marwyn mixed silver powder into a bowl of black tonic. Again, she said. Kaelin's reflection stared back at him with eyes that looked too human. He hated it. Since boyhood, his wolf had been a violent, constant presence, a shadow with teeth pacing behind his thoughts. Even when Kaelin slept, the beast watched. Even when he smiled for treaty feasts, the beast judged everyone near his throat. Even when he took lovers, the beast remained distant and contemptuous, refusing to bind, refusing to soften. The court believed Kaelin had rejected mate after mate because he was proud. That was easier than the truth. His wolf had attacked every bond fate tried to offer. The first candidate had collapsed, bleeding from the nose when the mate pulse touched him. The second had screamed that something inside the king wanted to devour her soul. The third, a noblewoman from the western Pax, had entered his chamber willingly and left with white hair by morning. Kaelin had stopped allowing the rites after that. He had ruled without a Luna, without heirs, without tenderness, because every attempt to join his soul to another brought death close enough to smell. Then the border wars worsened. 3 vassal pacts threatened rebellion. The royal council demanded the Moonrite return. A king without a mate was an unstable throne, they said. A king without heirs invited knives. Kaelin had agreed only because his wolf had begun weakening months before, and Marwyn told him the right mate might anchor what was left. She did not tell the court how often he woke unable to breathe. She did not tell them his shifts had become slower, more painful, sometimes incomplete. She did not tell them that his wolf, once a monstrous black creature larger than any alpha beast in the kingdom, now spent hours silent in the dark of his soul, watching him with betrayed amber eyes. Again, Marwyn repeated. Kaelin gripped the edge of the table until the wood cracked. He reached inward with the full force of his command. Rise. The beast did not rise. It whimpered. The sound was so soft, so broken, that Kaelin nearly staggered. His wolf had never whimpered in its life. Rage filled him because rage was easier than fear. "What did that girl do?" he asked. Marwyn's hand stilled over the tonic. "The wolfless one? The candles changed when she stood before me. Old halls played tricks during storms. The moonstone cracked. A flaw in the mineral. My wolf heard her." Marwyn turned then, face serene, eyes sharpened. "Your wolf is dying, Majesty. Dying creatures reach toward many things. That does not make every shadow sacred." Kaelin looked at her through the mirror. "You told me the right might strengthen him. It still may. Lady Vespera's bloodline is clean, fertile, politically advantageous, and responsive to your command. The court already favors her. My wolf did not look at Vespera. Your wolf is no longer a reliable judge." It was a dangerous thing to say to an Alpha King. Anyone else would have lost their tongue for it. But Marwyn had served the throne since Kaelin was 10, since the night his father died foaming black blood and his mother walked into the sea with stones sewn into her dress. Marwyn had sealed Kaelin's first wounds. Marwyn had taught him which herbs slowed silver poison and which prayers calmed the beast when it tried to claw through his skin. She had earned the right to speak hard truths, or so he had believed for most of his life. "Where's the girl now?" he asked. "Gone," Marwyn said. Too quickly. Kaelin turned. "Gone where?" "Released, as you commanded." I asked where. For the first time, irritation broke through the healer's calm. "Likely the lower city, perhaps beyond the gates by now. She has no pact claim, no court right, no legal protection." The words should not have mattered. Kaelin had spoken the decree himself. He had meant to sever useless complication before it grew teeth. Yet something inside him twisted. He remembered Elara Rowan standing barefoot in gray, wrists burning beneath silver, lifting her chin when his power pressed down. No wolf had answered him from within her, because there was no wolf there. But something had answered, something old enough that even the hall had gone silent. He reached inward again, not commanding this time, only listening. His wolf lay in darkness, ribs heaving, muzzle turned toward the city below. Kaelin felt the direction with sickening clarity. The beast was not reaching for Vespera, not for the right, not for Marwyn's tonic. It was reaching for the girl he had thrown into the rain. "Find her," he said. Marwyn's expression did not change, but the room seemed to grow colder. "Majesty, that would be unwise. I did not ask for counsel. You publicly released her. To summon her now would make the court question your judgment. Let them. It would give significance to a girl who should have none." Kaelin stepped closer. The air thickened with alpha pressure, enough to make the tonic ripple in its bowl. "Should have none." Marwyn lowered her gaze a fraction. "Not submission, calculation. I mean only that desperate courts create myths from accidents. If the people hear that your wolf weakened after dismissing a wolfless girl, they will not blame illness. They will blame cursecraft. Cursecraft." The word struck the room like flint. Forbidden magic, moon, blood, rites. Old healers who could touch the soul of a wolf and either mend it or unmake it. Stories told in frightened whispers and burned out of official histories. Kaelin had executed men for accusing noble women of less. "Do you believe she carries cursecraft?" he asked. Marwyn held his gaze. "I believe empty vessels sometimes invite dangerous things to fill them." Kaelin thought of Elara's eyes when he called her empty. He had expected pleading. He had found grief, yes, but also a strange pity, as if some part of her had looked past the crown and seen the wound beneath his ribs. The memory unsettled him more than the cracked moonstone. "Find her," he repeated, quietly. Marwyn bowed, "As my king commands." But when she left the chamber, she did not send riders to retrieve Elara. She sent them to erase her. Elara learned by sunrise that exile was not a single event, but 1,000 doors refusing to open. The lower city innkeeper looked at the broken silver around her wrists and crossed himself in the old wolf sign. The baker who might have given stale bread to a hungry child would not meet her eyes. At the eastern gate, a guard read the decree stamped into the silver tag hanging from her cuff and told her she could leave the capital, but she could not return without pact claim or royal summons. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked before she could stop herself. The guard was young. For a moment, pity softened his mouth. Then he saw the older guard watching and shrugged. Wolfless folk manage somehow. Wolfless folk, as if there were villages of them somewhere, laughing around fires, unbothered by the silence in their chests. Elara stepped through the gate with a bruised shoulder, burned wrists, and half a loaf of bread she had found beneath a market cart. Beyond the capital, the king's road cut through frost-stiff fields toward the moonwood, an ancient forest no one entered willingly after dark. Elara did not know if Ashvin would take her back. The decree said no pack was bound to claim her. Ashvin had been waiting years for that permission. She walked until the palace towers became black needles behind her, and the rain turned to sleet. Around midday, She found a wounded raven tangled in a thorn hedge, one wing twisted under a snare cord. She almost kept walking. Survival, she told herself, did not leave room for every broken thing. But the raven looked at her with one bright black eye, furious and afraid, and Elara saw too much of herself in it. She knelt. "You should have chosen a kinder road," she whispered. The bird snapped at her fingers. She freed it anyway, tore a strip from her skirt, and bound the wing close enough to keep it from dragging. The raven settled against her palm, its trembling slowing. For an instant, warmth moved through Elara's burned wrists into the bird's body. The silver cuffs rang again. The raven's eye flashed pale. Then it launched from her hands, wing not perfect but stronger than it should have been, and disappeared into the trees. Elara stared after it, heart pounding. Behind her, a branch cracked. She turned. 3 men stood on the road, cloaked in royal guard gray but without insignia. Their swords were already drawn. "Elara Rowan?" the tallest asked. She stepped back. "Who wants to know? The crown has reconsidered your release." Hope betrayed her, before wisdom could stop it. It rose sharp and foolish in her chest. "The king sent you?" The man smiled. "Not the king." Elara ran. She had no wolf speed, no trained soldier's endurance, no weapon but a small herb knife hidden in her boot. The men followed with easy confidence, spreading out to drive her from the road into the moonwood. Snow began falling in thin white threads between the trees. Elara's breath tore in her throat. Twice, she slipped on wet leaves. Once, an arrow struck the trunk beside her face hard enough to shower bark across her cheek. She ran deeper, where the forest grew old and black and crowded with stones carved in shapes no one remembered. The thread behind her ribs pulled toward the palace, then twisted painfully, as if something far away had sensed her fear. The silver cuffs heated, not burned, heated, light, gathered beneath the skin of her wrists. She shoved her hands into her sleeves, terrified of the glow. A ravine opened ahead, narrow but steep, filled with white mist and the roar of an unseen stream. Elara skidded to a stop at its edge. Behind her, the men emerged from the trees. "No need to make this ugly," the leader said. "High Healer wants proof. A hand will do. A heart is better." Elara's stomach turned cold. "High Healer, Marwyn, not the king." The second man lunged. Elara slashed with her herb knife, catching his cheek. He cursed and struck her so hard she fell near the ravine edge. Her palms hit frozen mud. The cuffs split the skin at her wrists. Blood welled bright red against silver. The forest changed. Every sound vanished except the stream below, and a heartbeat that was not hers. The men froze. In the mist behind Elara, pale shapes appeared between the trees. Wolves, but not living wolves. Their bodies were made of moonlight and old breath, ribs faintly visible, eyes like stars drowned in milk. The leader whispered a prayer. Elara could not move. The ghost wolves did not attack. They looked at her bleeding wrists and lowered their heads. Then a real howl ripped through the forest, black and furious, and something enormous crashed between the trees. Alpha King Kaelin burst from the snow in half-shift, not fully man and not fully beast. Claws black as iron, eyes burning gold. He struck the first attacker before the man could raise his sword. The body hit a tree and did not rise. The second ran. Kaelin moved with terrifying speed, but halfway through the leap his body faltered. The gold in his eyes flickered. His claws receded too soon. He crashed to one knee, snarling in pain. The fleeing man turned, realizing the king was weakened. He lifted his blade. Elara did not think. She seized a fallen branch and stepped between them. It was absurd. She knew it, even as she did it. A wolfless girl, with a branch standing before a wounded alpha king. The attacker laughed once. Then the ghost wolves behind her lifted their heads. The man saw them and fled into the ravine mist. Silence returned slowly. Kaelin remained on one knee, one hand braced in the snow, breathing as if each breath cost him. Elara should have run. Instead, she looked at his face and saw not the king who had humiliated her, but the dying presence behind his eyes, the wolf that had called to her through rain and stone. "You sent them?" she asked. Kaelin's head lifted. Fury crossed his expression, then confusion, then something dangerously close to shame. "No. They said the High Healer wanted proof." His gaze dropped to her bleeding wrists. The silver cuffs were glowing white. The sight drained color from his face. "Take those off," he said. "I would have, if your court had left me a key." He flinched. It was small, but she saw it. He reached for the cuffs, then stopped before touching her. "Silver burns wolf. Blood. Then I suppose I am fortunate to have none." The words came out sharper than she intended. Kaelin absorbed them as if he deserved the cut. For a long moment, snow gathered between them. Then his body shuddered. Pain bent him forward. A growl tore from his throat, followed by a sound Elara had heard in her dreams since the hall, the dying wolf trapped beneath his skin. She stepped closer before fear could stop her. "What is happening to you?" "Nothing you need concern yourself with. Your wolf is crying." Kaelin went still. Slowly, he looked up. "You can hear him?" Elara should have lied. Every instinct screamed for it. But the ghost wolves were watching. The silver cuffs were still ringing. And Kaelin Vare, the Alpha King who had told the world she carried nothing, was staring at her as if she had just named the most guarded secret in his kingdom. "Yes," she whispered. His face hardened, not from cruelty this time, but terror armored as command. "Then, you are coming back with me." Elara stepped away. "No." The word startled them both. Kings were not refused often. Alpha kings almost never. "You are injured," he said, "because your court threw me away. My court did not send those men, but you gave them permission when you told the kingdom I had no protection." The accusation struck clean. Kaelin rose unsteadily, even weakened. He towered over her, all black cloak, blood, and barely leashed power. "If Marwyn sent men after you, the palace is more dangerous than this forest. For me, the palace was always dangerous." His jaw tightened. "I cannot protect you out here. You did not protect me in there." This time the silence was not empty. It was alive with the things neither of them could take back. Kaelin looked toward the ghost wolves, but they had faded, leaving only snow and old stones. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. "My wolf has not answered me since you left." Elara's anger faltered. "That is not my doing." "I know." The admission cost him. She could see it. "But he reached for you. He still does." Elara wrapped her bleeding wrists against her body. She wanted to hate him cleanly. It would have been easier if he remained only the cruel king from the hall. But the man before her looked less like a tyrant, and more like someone standing at the edge of an abyss he had built with his own hands. "If I return," she said, "it is not because you command me." His eyes held hers. "Then why?" Elara looked at the blood staining the snow, at the place where the ghost wolves had bowed, at the palace towers barely visible through the storm. The thread inside her pulled so hard it hurt. "Because something is wrong with your wolf," she said. "And I need to know why it knows my name when no one else ever cared to say it kindly." Kaelin brought her back through the hunter's gate, not the royal entrance. That told Elara more than any apology could have. Kings used grand doors when they wanted witnesses. Men used hidden doors when they wanted secrets. He wrapped his cloak around her shoulders before they reached the walls. Not gently, exactly, but with a rough urgency that suggested he had forgotten she might refuse it. The cloak smelled of winter rain, steel, and something darker beneath. Wolf, fur, smoke, and blood. For the first time in her life, Elara wondered what it would be like to carry a scent others could recognize as belonging to her. The thought embarrassed her, so she buried it beneath caution. Kaelin's guards stared when they saw her. One moved to challenge them, saw the king's expression, and wisely lowered his eyes. Inside the palace, Kaelin led her through narrow servant corridors where old tapestries covered cracks in the stone and candlelight trembled in iron cages. Twice he stumbled. Twice he caught himself before she could reach out. Pride, Elara realized, was not always arrogance. Sometimes it was the last wall standing around a wound. In the Eastern Infirmary, Kaelin took a key from a locked cabinet and removed the silver cuffs from her wrists himself. His fingers never touched her skin. Still, when the metal fell away, the air between them shivered. The burns beneath were ugly, red and blistered, cut open where she had bled in the forest. Kaelin stared at them for a long time. Who fastened them this tight? A guard with kind eyes, Elara said. That was the kindest part of the evening. He looked away first. I said things in the hall that should not have been said. You said them because you believed them. Yes. She appreciated the honesty more than an easy denial, which made her dislike him slightly less and resent him slightly more. Do you still? Kaelin did not answer quickly. Outside, rain tapped against the infirmary windows like fingernails. I believe wolves make us what we are, he said. I was raised to believe that without one, a person stands outside the moon's design. And now, his gaze returned to her wrists. Now my wolf is dying, and the only voice he follows belongs to the woman I called empty. It was not an apology, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall. Elara sat on the edge of a cot while he opened jars and bandages with the impatience of someone used to wounds but not tending them. When he reached for a salve, she stopped him. Not that one. He frowned. It is royal burn balm. It has ash root in it. Good for silver cuts on shifters. Bad for human skin. You know healing? I know herbs. That is not what I asked. Elara took the jar from him and selected a smaller green one. People trust herbs more when they believe the hands using them have no magic. Kaelin watched her spread balm over her own wrists without flinching. Did your mother teach you? Her hand paused. Some. She was healer. Blood. She was Ashvin's burden until she saved its alpha. Then she was Ashvin's saint for 3 days. After that, they burned her books. Kaelin's eyes darkened. Why? Because people prefer miracles when they can bury the miracle. Worker. Something moved across his face, quick and painful. Before he could answer, the infirmary door opened. High healer Marwyn entered with 2 royal guards, and Lady Vespera behind her like a bright blade in white silk. Marwyn's gaze fell to Elara's freed wrists, then to the king's cloak around her shoulders. Majesty, she said softly. You should have sent for me. Kaelin turned. I did. Last night. You failed to find her. I sent riders. You sent knives. The room chilled. Vespera's fan lowered. Marwyn looked genuinely wounded, which made Elara fear her more. That is a grave accusation. It came from a dying man in the Moonwood. Bandits lie when frightened. They named you. Men will name the moon if they think it will spare them. Kaelin stepped closer, and the guards shifted uneasily. Careful, Marwyn. The high healer bowed her head, not in submission but in patience. Always, Majesty. That is why I must speak plainly. Bringing this girl back after a public release creates danger. The court is already unsettled by last night's omen. If they see her near you, rumors will grow. Lady Vespera glided forward. Your Majesty, the noble houses are concerned for your health. The moonrite cannot be delayed because one strange girl made candles flicker. Elara expected Kaelin to dismiss Vespera sharply. Instead, he studied the noblewoman with cold calculation. And what do the noble houses propose? Vespera smiled. Complete the rite tonight. Let the kingdom see strength. Let them see the future Luna at your side. Her eyes slid to Elara. And let servants return to servant places. Elara almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because humiliation had become so familiar, it had begun arriving in predictable shapes. Kaelin looked at Elara then. There was a question in his eyes, or perhaps a warning. She did not know him well enough to read it. Marwyn did. The girl should be kept under observation, the healer said. For her own protection, of course. If she carries nothing dangerous, we will know soon enough. No silver, Kalan said. No chains. Majesty. No chains. The command cracked through the room. Even Vespera lowered her eyes. Elara felt something inside her shift at the sound. Not submission. Recognition of power, yes, but also recognition of restraint. Kalan could have used that voice on her in the forest. He had not. Marwen's face smoothed. As you wish. I will place her in the old moon chamber. Kalan's expression sharpened. Why there? It is warded, private, appropriate for observation. Elara saw the lie, only because Marwen's hand moved slightly toward the pendant at her throat, a silver disc engraved with a waning moon. Her mother had made that same motion when hiding fear. The old moon chamber was not a room, Elara realized. It was a test. Kalan looked at her. Will you stay? The court would have heard a command. Elara heard the difference. He was asking because she had forced him to understand he no longer had the right to command this part of her. For now, she said. Vespera's mouth tightened. Marwen smiled faintly. And somewhere deep inside the palace walls, something old woke and began to listen. The old moon chamber lay beneath the eastern tower, behind a door of white oak, carved with phases of the moon that had been slashed by claw marks long before Elara was born. The servants avoided looking at it. The guard who escorted her made the wolf sign before unlocking the door, then stepped back quickly, as if the room itself might breathe poison. Inside, dust lay thick over a circular floor of pale stone. There were no windows, only a domed ceiling set with hundreds of tiny moonstones that glimmered faintly in the dark. At the center stood a dry basin shaped like a wolf's open mouth. The air smelled of old rain, old blood, and dried lavender. Elara knew at once that this had not always been a prison. Once, perhaps, people had come here willingly. Once, perhaps, hands like her mother's had washed wounds in that basin, while wolves slept unharmed nearby. Now, the chamber held a narrow bed, a table, a pitcher of water, and ward marks newly painted along the walls in silver ash. Observation, Marwen had called it. Elara called it a cage without bars. She spent the first hour cleaning the burns on her wrists, and the second searching the room for anything useful. Behind a loose stone near the basin, she found a fragment of parchment so old it nearly crumbled at her touch. Most of the writing had faded, but one line remained dark, as if written in moonlight rather than ink. The wolf does not die where the hand of the moon remembers its name. Elara read the sentence until the words blurred. Hand of the moon. Her mother had once woken from fever whispering something like that. Not a title. A warning. Before Elara could think further, the moonstones in the ceiling brightened. A pulse moved through the floor. Somewhere above, the king's wolf screamed. Elara doubled over, hand pressed to her chest. This time the sound was not faint. It tore through her as if the beast had buried claws beneath her ribs and pulled. She reached toward the wall to steady herself, and the silver ashwards flared blue. The door flew open. Kalan stood there, pale and furious, one hand at his throat. What did you do? Behind him, Marwen arrived, breathless, carrying a black leather case. Elara could barely speak. I was alone. His Majesty collapsed in council, Marwen said. At the exact moment the wards activated. The wards hurt him? Elara asked. Marwen's eyes flashed. The wards protect him. Kalan stared past Elara to the glowing marks on the wall. His breathing was ragged. Remove them, Marwen turned sharply. Majesty, no. Remove them. If she is what I fear, I said, remove them. The command shook dust from the ceiling. Marwen's lips pressed together. With a cloth soaked in some bitter-smelling oil, she wiped away one silver ash mark. Kalan inhaled sharply, as if pressure had eased around his lungs. Elara watched, horror dawning. They were not protecting him from me. No one answered. Marwen wiped another mark with visible reluctance. The moonstones dimmed. Kalan's shoulders lowered. Elara looked at the high healer. They were keeping something from reaching him. Marwan's gaze became cold enough to kill. A girl who spent one night in a palace chamber should be careful speaking on royal magic. A royal healer should be careful painting pain on her king's walls and calling it protection. The words left Elara before fear could restrain them. Kaelin looked at her, and for one dangerous heartbeat she thought he might rebuke her. Instead, something like grim satisfaction touched his mouth. "Leave us," he told Marwan. "Majesty, now." Marwan bowed with perfect grace, but as she passed Elara, she whispered too softly for Kaelin to hear. "Your mother made the same mistake." She thought compassion could shield her from history. Then she was gone. Elara stood very still. Kaelin noticed. What did she say? Nothing useful. Elara. It was the first time he had said her name without title, insult, or command. The sound unsettled her enough that she turned away. "Why is your wolf dying?" Kaelin entered the chamber and closed the door. For a moment, he looked less like a king and more like a man standing in a shrine to a god he no longer believed in, because every bond offered to him has poisoned him. "Mate bonds?" He nodded once. "The court thinks I am difficult to please." Marwan encouraged that rumor. "It makes me look proud, not cursed." "What happened?" Kaelin's jaw tightened. The first girl fainted when the bond touched. The second tried to claw open her own chest. The third survived, but she never shifted again. Elara's breath caught. "And you let the rite continue?" "No. I stopped it for 6 years. Until last night, until my council threatened to divide the throne if I did not produce a Luna. There it was. The secret beneath the crown. Not merely a dying wolf, but a kingdom circling weakness like ravens." Elara thought of the noble houses watching him in the hall, of Vespra's perfect smile, of Marwan's careful hands. "You were afraid," she said. Kaelin's eyes hardened. "Choose your next words with care." "You were afraid," she repeated softer. "And so you made someone else look smaller." He flinched as if she had struck him. The silence that followed was so tense the moonstones hummed. Then he said, "Yes." Elara had not expected that. Anger could stand easily against denial. It wavered before honesty. Kaelin moved closer, stopping an arm's length away. "When you stood beneath the arch, my wolf went quiet for the first time in months. Not dead quiet, peaceful quiet. I hated you for that before I knew your name. Why? Because peace is a cruel thing to offer a dying beast if it cannot last." Elara looked at his throat scar, at the faint black veins spreading beneath it. "And now? Now I do not know whether you are salvation, punishment, or the sharpest trap my enemies have ever set." His gaze held hers. "But I know this. When you were in the forest, my wolf dragged me after you half dead. He would have torn through my skin to reach you if he could." Heat rose in Elara's face, unwelcome and impossible. She turned toward the basin. "That sounds like your problem, not mine." "It is." His voice lowered. "But it has become yours because I made you vulnerable before the court. I cannot undo that with one rescue." "No," she said. "You cannot." The words hurt him. She saw it, and some small, wounded part of her was glad. Another part, the part that had heard his wolf crying, was not. Above them, the moonstones flickered again, not blue this time, but silver-white. The dry basin at the room's center trembled. Dust slid from its carved edges. A single drop of clear water appeared in the wolf's stone mouth. Elara and Kaelin both stared. The drop fell into the basin with a sound like a bell. Kaelin whispered, "That well has been dry since my grandfather's reign." Elara stepped back. The parchment fragment in her sleeve warmed against her wrist. "The wolf does not die where the hand of the moon remembers its name. I think," she said slowly, "your palace remembers things your court wants forgotten." Kaelin looked at the silver drop shining in the ancient basin. "Then we need to know what else it remembers before Marwan does." For 3 days, Elara remained in the old moon chamber, and for 3 days the kingdom above her began to fracture in ways no decree could hide. On the first day, Kaelin failed to shift before the royal council. The official explanation was, exhaustion from border matters. But too many nobles had seen him grip the table until blood ran from his palm, while no claws came. On the second day, a young soldier from the western barracks challenged a command, and did not immediately bare his throat when Kaelin's alpha power struck the room. The soldier was horrified afterward, begging forgiveness, but the damage was done. An alpha king's command was not meant to be resistible. On the third day, the werewolves in the royal kennels stopped eating and faced the eastern tower, whining whenever Elara slept. Servants began making signs against curses in the corridors. Noble houses sent private messages to one another. Lady Vespera's father requested that the moonrite continue immediately, for the stability of the realm. Marwyn visited Elara each morning with a smile that never warmed her eyes, checking her pulse, her burns, her pupils, the temperature of her skin, the condition of her nails. "You are thorough for someone who believes I am empty," Elara said during the second visit. Marwyn closed her fingers around Elara's wrist, right over the healing silver burn. "Emptiness can hide depth. Is that what you fear?" "I fear ignorance wearing innocence." "Then look in a mirror." Marwyn's grip tightened, just enough to hurt. "Your mother had a clever mouth too." Elara went cold. "You knew my mother." "I knew what she was. A healer. A violation." Marwyn released her and wiped her fingers on a cloth, as if Elara's skin had left residue. "There are reasons moon healer bloodlines were erased from court service." "Erased," Elara repeated. "Is that the word healers use for murder?" Marwyn's composure thinned. Beneath it, Elara glimpsed not simple cruelty, but fear hardened by years of justification. "Your kind could reach into a wolf, soul, and change its allegiance. You could mend an alpha, yes. You could also unmake him. A kingdom cannot survive power that kneels to no law. So you made the law a blade. We made it a shield. For whom?" Marwyn did not answer. That was answer enough. During those same days, Kaelin came at night. At first, Elara thought he came only because his wolf forced him. He would stand near the threshold, face drawn with exhaustion, and the beast inside him would quiet the moment Elara looked up. The first night he brought records from the sealed archives, old court ledgers with pages removed wherever moon healers were mentioned. The second, he brought her mother's name copied from a forbidden registry. Saris Rowan, last confirmed descendant of the lunar hand. Elara touched the ink until the letters blurred. "She told me empty cups survive," Elara whispered. Kaelin stood across the table, silent. "I thought she meant I should endure being nothing. Perhaps she meant you should survive, being hidden." Elara looked up. The softness in his voice was brief but real, and it frightened her more than his anger had. "Do not make my mother into a destiny because your wolf needs one." "I'm trying not to. Try harder." He inclined his head, accepting the rebuke. That too unsettled her. Kings did not accept correction from exiled girls. Yet Kaelin, proud, dangerous Kaelin, listened when she spoke now. Not always gently, not always without conflict, but he listened as if her words could alter the shape of a room. On the third night, pain drove him to his knees in the chamber before he could hide it. He staggered through the door during a storm, one hand braced against the wall, black veins crawling from the scar at his throat to his jaw. Elara rose from the table. "Kaelin." His name left her mouth before she remembered she had not been invited to use it. He laughed once, breathless and bitter. "There, that is new." "What?" "You said my name as if I were still inside it." Then he collapsed. Elara reached him before his head struck the floor. The moment her hands touched his shoulders, the world went silver. She was no longer in the moon chamber. She was standing in a vast dark wood beneath a dead moon, and before her lay a black wolf larger than any creature she had ever imagined. Its fur was matted with shadow. Silver thorns pierced its ribs, its paws, its throat. Around its neck hung broken threads of light, each one ending in a scream. Failed mate bonds, poisoned attempts, wounds no ordinary healer could see. The beast opened one amber eye and looked at her with unbearable recognition. Not desire, not ownership, relief. Elara stepped back inside the vision. "I do not know how to help you." The wolf's breath shook the trees. It lowered its massive head until its muzzle touched the ground at her feet. A memory rose that was not hers. Her mother's voice chanting beside a dying alpha, hands glowing white, tears on her face as she gave too much of herself. Elara understood then why Ceres had died. Moon healers did not simply cure. They shared the wound. They entered the wolf's pain and carried part of it back. "No," Elara whispered. "I cannot." The black wolf did not move. It only watched her, not demanding, waiting. That made it worse. Elara returned to herself with a gasp. She was kneeling on the chamber floor, Kaelin's head against her lap, her palms pressed to his chest. Moonlight flowed from her hands in thin, terrified threads. Kaelin's eyes opened. For one unguarded moment, king, crown, command, and cruelty were gone. He looked up at her like a man who had been drowning for years and had just remembered air. "Elara," he breathed. The door opened. Lady Vespera stood there, dressed for evening court, her face frozen in shock at the sight of the wolfless girl holding the half-conscious king in her lap, while moonlight burned between them. Behind her, Marwyn smiled slowly. Elara knew before anyone spoke that the trap had closed. Vespera screamed. By morning, the entire palace knew the wolfless girl had bewitched the king beneath the eastern tower. By noon, the royal council had convened an emergency judgment. By sunset, Elara stood once more in the Hall of Crowns, this time without silver cuffs, because Kaelin had forbidden them, but surrounded by enough armed guards to make clear that mercy and trust were not the same thing. The hall looked different after 3 days of fear. The banners seemed darker. The nobles stood farther apart, as if suspicion had become contagious. Lady Vespera stood near her father, face pale with righteous injury. One hand pressed to her throat as though she had personally survived an attack. High healer Marwyn occupied her place beside the throne, white robes immaculate, pendant gleaming. Kaelin sat on the wolf-rib throne above them all, outwardly controlled, inwardly suffering. Elara could feel it from across the hall. His wolf, weakened but awake, pacing toward her inside his soul every time Marwyn spoke. "We are not here to condemn without evidence," Marwyn told the court, her voice gentle and grave. "We are here because the realm must understand what stands near its king." Lord Morcant stepped forward. What stands near him is a packless girl with unknown blood, found glowing over his body in a sealed chamber. Murmurs rose. Kaelin's fingers tightened on the throne. "Careful." The single word silenced half the hall. Marwyn inclined her head. "No one questions your majesty's strength, but strength does not make a king immune to hidden influence. The old laws are clear. If forbidden mooncraft is suspected, the accused must be tested beneath the lunar arch." Elara looked toward the arch behind the throne, the same ancient structure that had cracked when she first stood before Kaelin. Its moonstones were dark now, except for the broken one, which glowed faintly like an eye pretending to sleep. "What test?" Kaelin asked. Marwyn's face was composed. "The trial of the empty vessel." A ripple of unease passed through the oldest nobles. Even Vespera looked uncertain. Kaelin leaned forward. "That right is banned." "Dormant," Marwyn corrected, "not banned." It was designed to reveal whether a body without a wolf is truly empty or occupied by forbidden power. Elara felt the room tilt. "What happens during the trial?" she asked. Marwyn looked at her almost kindly. "If you are harmless, nothing. And if I am not, the moon will show us." Kaelin rose. "No." Marwyn turned to him. "Majesty, refusing the trial will be taken as admission that you fear what she is. I do not fear her." The answer came too quickly. Elara heard what others did not. "I fear what will be done to her." Lord Morcant seized on the moment. "Then let the court see truth. If the girl is innocent, she walks free. If she is not, the king proves he stands with the realm, not with a witch. Witch. The word moved through the hall like spilled poison. Elara looked at Kaelin. For one heartbeat, the world narrowed to the space between them. She saw the war inside him. If he refused, the council would accuse him of being controlled. His enemies would move. His throne might crack before nightfall. If he agreed, he placed her inside a ritual designed by people who feared what she might be. This was the moment she had known would come. The place where a powerful man almost protected her, but the world around him demanded a price. Kaelin descended the throne steps. Marwyn watched with sharp interest. He stopped before Elara, close enough that the court began whispering again. "I can end this," he said under his breath. "How?" "By declaring royal protection and arresting anyone who objects." And then, his mouth tightened. "Then the noble houses rebel before winter ends. And your wolf?" He did not answer. Elara looked past him to the court that hated her for being nothing and feared her for possibly being something. A bitter calm settled over her. All her life, others had decided what her silence meant. Empty, broken, dangerous, useful, burden, omen. Now the choice before her was not safe, but it was hers. "Let them test me," she said. Kaelin's eyes flashed. "No. You asked me why I returned from the forest. I said I needed to know why your wolf knew my name." She looked at Marwyn. "I think she knows." Kaelin's jaw hardened. "She wants you exposed." "Then let her expose enough truth to hang herself with it." Something like pride flickered in his face, unwilling and fierce. "You are afraid." "Yes." Elara lifted her chin. "But I am tired of being hidden inside other people's fear." Kaelin stared at her, as if she had just stepped beyond his reach. Perhaps she had. Then, very slowly, he turned to the court. "The trial will proceed," he said, and the hall erupted. He lifted one hand. Silence fell beneath his alpha command, but Elara felt how thin it had become. A few wolves resisted for a breath too long. Kaelin felt it too. His face did not change. No silver chains, no bloodletting, no blade touches her. If the old law is invoked, it answers to the crown. Marwyn bowed. "Of course, Majesty." Elara did not trust the ease of her agreement. She should have, because the High Healer had never needed chains to spring the trap. She had only needed the king's consent before witnesses. The lunar arch awakened at moonrise. Its stones burned white. The floor beneath it opened into a circular pattern of ancient runes, each one filling slowly with light. Elara was ordered to stand at the center. Kaelin remained at the base of the throne steps, every line of his body rigid. Marwyn began the chant in the old tongue. The first words meant emptiness. The second meant vessel. The third meant obedience. Elara knew none of this through learning. She knew because her blood recoiled. The runes brightened. Pain opened in her wrists where the silver burns had not fully healed. Across the hall, Kaelin inhaled sharply. His wolf felt it. Good, Elara thought fiercely. Let him feel what his court called harmless. Marwyn's chant rose. The lunar arch poured light over Elara's body, searching for a wolf that was not there. The court waited for nothing to happen, for proof that she was empty after all, for permission to laugh again. Instead, every wolf in the hall began to whine. Nobles clutched their chests. Guards staggered. Somewhere outside, the royal kennels erupted in howls. Kaelin took one step toward her, then stopped, face twisting in pain. Marwyn's eyes shone with triumph. "Continue," she commanded the acolytes. "The vessel answers." The runes changed color from white to blue. Elara's knees nearly buckled. In the vision beneath the pane, she saw the black wolf again, but this time, the silver thorns in its body were attached to the runes beneath her feet. The trial was not revealing her. It was draining him through her. "Kaelin!" she gasped. He moved instantly. Marwyn raised her hand. "If the king crosses the circle, The right will interpret interference as guilt. End it, he snarled. Only the moon can end what has begun. A lie. Elara heard it in the chamber stones, in the moonstones, in the sudden furious beat of her own blood. She looked at Marwyn and saw, beneath the healer's calm, fear. Not fear that Elara would die. Fear that she would survive. The runes flared. Kaelin dropped to one knee. The court gasped. It was the first time many had ever seen their Alpha King kneel, and terror moved through them like wind through dry leaves. Rain began striking the high windows, though the sky had been clear minutes before. Thunder rolled over the palace. The ceiling moonstones cracked one by one, raining silver dust. Elara's vision blurred. The trial demanded a wolf soul to judge, and because she had none of her own, it seized the nearest one bound to her by the hidden thread. Kaelin's wolf. The black beast inside him convulsed. Something in Elara broke open. Not power exactly, but memory older than her life. Her mother's hands. Her grandmother's whispered prayers. White wolves walking across black water. Women in moonlit chambers holding dying alphas through the long dark. Not as servants, not as witches, but as keepers of the sacred wound between ruler and beast. Elara looked at the Alpha King kneeling in stormlight, clutching his chest, the crown slipping crooked on his brow. The man who had called her empty was dying, because the court had mistaken hidden mercy for weakness. Her fear burned away. Not all at once, not cleanly, but enough. She lifted her bleeding wrists. "You wanted to know what stands near your king," she said. Her voice was no longer loud, yet every stone carried it. The runes beneath her feet stopped moving. Marwyn's chant faltered. Elara turned her palms upward. Silver fire rose from her skin. Then look. Moonlight exploded through the hall. The lunar arch shattered, not collapsed. Shattered upward, as if the moon itself had struck from beneath the stone. Silver fire spiraled around Elara, lifting her hair, burning away the gray dye in her dress, until the fabric shone white at the edges. The silver burns on her wrists opened into markings, shaped like crescent blades in healing hands. Across her collarbone, beneath skin no one had ever thought worth adorning, a hidden royal sigil appeared in pale blue light. A wolf's eye. Inside a full moon, surrounded by 7 drops of blood. Every elder in the room knew the symbol. None dared speak it. The mark of the lunar hand. The forbidden bloodline. The moon healers who had once stood beside Alpha Kings, not as servants, but as the only beings permitted to touch the soul of the throne. The court panicked. Some fell to their knees. Some drew blades. Lady Vespera screamed that it was witchcraft. Lord Morcant shouted for archers. But the wolves answered before the humans could. Every shifter in the hall, from noble Alpha to low guard, felt their inner wolf lower its head. Not in submission to Elara as a ruler. In recognition of a sacred presence their human minds had been taught to fear. Kaelin remained on one knee, rain pouring through the shattered ceiling though no roof had opened. His face was pale with agony, but his eyes were fixed on Elara with a wonder so raw it stripped him of kingship. Behind him, visible now to every person in the hall, the shadow of his black wolf emerged. It was enormous, wounded, bristling with silver thorns that ran from its throat into the floor beneath Marwyn's feet. Gasps turned to horrified silence. The court could see the curse. They could see the high healer's tonic marks burned into the thorns. They could see that the king's wolf had not been dying by fate. It had been bound slowly, carefully, expertly. Marwyn backed away. "Illusion," she said, but her voice shook. "Forbidden glamour. Do not look at it." Elara stepped from the broken circle. The runes died beneath her bare feet. "You poisoned him. I preserved him." The words burst from Marwyn with sudden fury, and the mask finally cracked. "You think a throne survives a beast like that unchecked? His father went mad. His grandfather slaughtered 3 villages in wolf rage. The Vare bloodline was born too strong. I kept the kingdom alive." Kaelin's eyes moved slowly to Marwyn. The betrayal struck deeper than any blade. "You did this?" For the first time, Marwyn looked almost sorrowful. "I did what your mother begged me to do before she died. Keep the beast controlled. Keep the crown from becoming a massacre. By killing my wolf? By weakening it enough that you could rule as man instead of monster." Kaelin tried to rise and failed. The black wolf shadow shuddered behind him. Elara felt its pain like fire in her own bones. Marwyn pointed at her. "And that is why her kind were erased. One touch from her, and all my work ends. The beast returns. The kingdom falls beneath a wolf no army can command." The court erupted again. But now, fear had two directions. Some stared at Kaelin, as if seeing their king for the first time. Others stared at Elara with desperate hope. A moon healer, a forbidden hand, a girl they had called empty, standing in the ruins of an ancient rite with the power to either save or sever the Alpha King's wolf. Lord Morcant recovered fastest. Political men always did. "If the king is compromised and the girl carries outlawed blood," he shouted, "the council must assume emergency authority." There it was. The true appetite beneath the fear. Thrones did not remain unattended long. Marwyn had weakened Kaelin to control him. Morcant would remove him to replace him. Vespera looked between the fallen king and Elara, realizing the crown she had imagined wearing now sat at the center of a storm. No silk could survive. Kaelin forced one hand against the floor, trying again to stand. Elara moved toward him. Spears lowered. "Do not touch him," Marwyn cried. "If she heals the wolf, it will bind to her. It will make her power over him absolute." Elara stopped. The hall froze with her. She understood then why moon healers had been feared. Healing was not neutral. To enter a wolf's pain was to be remembered by it. To save an alpha's beast was to become part of the bond between man, wolf, and crown. If she saved Kaelin, the court would never again call her nothing. They might call her worse. Witch, leashholder, queenmaker, monster bride. Kaelin looked up at her, breathing hard. "Elara." His voice was rough with pain, but clear. "Do not save me because they need proof. Do not save me because my wolf calls. Do it only if you choose." That was the moment the power truly shifted. Not when the court saw her mark. Not when the wolves bowed. When the Alpha King, half dead on the stones before the kingdom that worshipped strength, gave the wolfless girl the choice no one had ever given her. Elara's eyes filled, but she did not let tears fall. "You humiliated me before them. Yes. You made me packless. Yes. You called my blood empty." His face twisted. "Yes. And now your life is in my hands." Kaelin lowered his head. "Not to the court. Not to the moon. To her. Yes." The hall went utterly still. Elara looked at the man kneeling in storm rain. The king who had been cruel because fear had taught him cruelty first. The wounded wolf who had reached for her not as property, not as conquest, but as survival. She thought of her mother dying alone after saving an alpha who never protected her memory. She thought of Ashvin sending her away. She thought of every door that had closed because people feared what they did not understand. Then she stepped forward. "I will not be your secret," she said. "Never again." Kaelin lifted his head. "Never. I will not be used, hidden, or thanked in private while condemned in public. No, and if I save him," she whispered, looking at the black wolf shadow, "he does not belong to me. He belongs to himself." Something like devotion broke across Kaelin's face, fierce and irreversible. "Then save him as a free thing." Elara placed her hands on his chest. The world turned white. Healing the Alpha King's wolf was not beautiful. It was blood, memory, rage, and grief. Elara fell through Kaelin's skin into the dark forest of his soul and landed beside the black wolf's body as silver thorns tightened around them both. The beast was larger here, terrifying even wounded, each breath shaking the shadow trees. Its amber eyes watched her with trust, so absolute it nearly broke her. "Do not look at me like that," she whispered. "I do not know what I am doing." The wolf huffed, a pained sound that might have been agreement. Elara approached the first thorn, piercing its throat. The moment she touched it, Kaelin's memories opened around her. A boy of 10 hiding beneath a banquet table while his father, half-shifted and mad with blood fever, killed 3 council guards. A mother singing through tears as she washed blood from her son's hands and told him kings must master the monsters they inherit. Marwyn, younger then, pressing a tonic to his lips, promising the pain meant control. Kaelin at 16 shifting into a black wolf so huge the court recoiled in terror. Kaelin at 20 refusing to choose a Luna because the first candidate's scream still followed him through sleep. Kaelin alone, always alone, turning fear into command because no one tried to teach him tenderness that did not end in blood. Elara saw him humiliate others before they could see his weakness. She saw him reject softness, because softness had become a doorway through which enemies entered. She saw the moment in the hall when he looked at her and his wolf quieted, and she felt his terror, not of her, but of needing anyone that much. The thorn cut Elara's palm. Pain flooded her throat. She could have let go. She did not. "You were cruel," she told the wolf, though she meant the man too. "Pain explains it. It does not excuse it." The black wolf closed its eyes. Elara pulled. The thorn came free with a scream that tore through the Hall of Crowns. Outside the vision, the court watched Elara's palms blaze against Kaelin's chest, while black veins retreated from his throat 1 inch at a time. Inside, Elara moved from thorn to thorn. Each one carried poison. Each one carried a lie, control, safety, duty, bloodline purity, political survival, fear dressed as wisdom. By the 7th thorn, Elara was shaking. By the 10th, she was bleeding from the nose. By the 12th, she understood why her mother had died. Moon healers did not lack power. They lacked protection from the cost of compassion. Kaelin appeared beside her then, not as king but as a man in the soulwood, scarred throat bare, crown gone. "Stop," he said. "If you continue, it will kill you. Your wolf still has thorns in his heart. Then leave them. He will die. Then he dies with me." Elara stared at him. "You would rather die than owe me?" "No." His voice broke. "I would rather die than make your mercy another thing taken from you." The words struck deeper than any memory. Elara had expected command. She had expected desperation. She had not expected him to choose her life over his wolf. The black beast whined, furious at both of them. Despite everything, Elara almost smiled. He disagrees. He usually does. Their eyes met in the dark soulwood. Something passed between them then. Not a completed love, not forgiveness neatly tied, but the first dangerous thread of something neither could command. Kaelin stepped closer. "Share it," he said. "What?" "The wound. If you must carry it, give me half." "You do not know what that means." "No, but I know what it meant when I left you alone in that hall. I will not do it again." Elara's throat tightened. "This will hurt." "Good." He placed his hand over hers on the thorn buried in the wolf's heart. "Let it." They pulled together. Pain exploded. In the Hall of Crowns, Kaelin arched beneath Elara's hands and roared, not as a man, but as a wolf returning from the edge of death. The sound shattered every remaining window. Guards fell back. Nobles covered their ears. Marwyn stumbled, face white with disbelief, as the silver thorns visible in the wolf shadow burned to ash one by one. But healing did not end the danger. It revealed the final piece of the curse. Beneath the last thorn, tied around the black wolf's heart, was a chain of white hair and blood-red thread. Elara knew it at once, from the old registry Kaelin had brought her. The hair belonged to a moon healer, not her mother. Someone older. Someone murdered to craft the binding. "Marwyn," Elara whispered. Outside the vision, Marwyn heard her name and ran. Kaelin's eyes snapped open. His wolf rose behind him, no longer collapsing, still wounded but immense, furious, free enough to command the room. "Seize her," Kylan snarled. The guards hesitated. Marwen had been the court's healer for decades. Hesitation saved her. She flung the silver pendant from her throat to the floor. It split open, releasing a cloud of powdered moonbone. The Hall of Crowns plunged into darkness. When the candles reignited blue, Marwen stood beside the Lunar Arch ruins with a ceremonial blade in her hand and Lady Vespera trapped against her chest. "No one moves," Marwen said. Her calm had burned away. What remained was conviction sharpened into madness. If the old blood rises, the kingdom falls. I will not let one forgotten girl undo generations of protection. Vespera sobbed, jeweled pride, gone. Elara swayed, drained nearly empty, but Kylan caught her before she fell. His arm around her was warm, solid, and shaking. For once, he did not seem to care who saw. Lord Morcant shouted for his daughter, but Marwen dragged the blade closer to Vespera's throat. "You wanted your blood on the throne," Marwen hissed at him. "You fools never understood. The throne itself is diseased." Kylan stepped forward. "Let her go." Marwen laughed. "Your command no longer frightens me. I held your wolf's leash for 15 years. The black wolf behind Kylan growled. This time, the hall felt it in the stones. Marwen's face tightened. She looked at Elara. "You think healing makes you merciful? Wait until every alpha in the realm begs for your hand, your blood, your obedience. Wait until kings kneel and call it love, because they need what is inside you." Your mother understood too late. Elara straightened, despite the pain. "My mother died because people like you made healing a crime and secrecy a grave. Your mother died because she saved a beast." "No," Kylan said, voice low. "She died because no one stood beside her." The words shook Elara more than the magic had. Marwen's blade trembled. Touching speech, but the court will not follow a king bound to forbidden blood. Kylan looked around the hall, at nobles who had watched his weakness, guards who had doubted his command, counselors already calculating survival. Then he did the one thing no one expected. He removed his crown. The iron circlet looked heavy in his hands, black against the silver rain. Then, "Let the court hear me without it," he said. The hall stilled. I was poisoned by fear. By counsel I trusted. By laws written to protect power from mercy. I called Elara Rowan empty before this court because I mistook hidden strength for absence. I stripped her protection and made her prey. For that, the shame is mine. Elara's breath caught. Public apology from an alpha king was not weakness. It was a blade turned inward before witnesses. It could cost him everything, Kylan continued, each word carrying farther than command. She did not bind my wolf. She freed him. She did not claim my throne. She saved my life when she had every right to let me die. His gaze found Elara's. If the kingdom demands I condemn her to prove I am fit to rule, then the kingdom has forgotten what rule is for. Marwen's face twisted. Pretty words will not stop history. "No," Kylan said. His eyes flashed gold, and this time the power that rolled through the hall was not brittle or poisoned. It was deep, black, and alive. But truth will. His wolf lunged. Marwen slashed Vespera's arm and flung the blood across the broken runes before Kylan could reach her. The floor answered with a violent red flare. Not moonlight. Blood magic, hidden beneath the trial lines, waiting for sacrifice. The old hall groaned. From beneath the stone rose the echoes of dead alpha wolves, bound by past fear. Beasts chained, silenced, used, and buried beneath royal order. Marwen had not only weakened Kylan, she had built his leash from generations of murdered wolf souls. The dead rose angry. Shadows flooded the hall, wolf-shaped and starving, their eyes empty silver. Nobles screamed, guards shifted in panic, bones cracking, fur bursting, but their wolves recoiled from the dead things. Kylan shoved Elara behind him. She could barely stand. "Get her out," He ordered a guard. Elara seized his sleeve. "No. You are drained. They are not attacking the court." She stared at the dead wolf, shadows circling the throne. They are attacking the crown. The first shadow lunged at Kalen. He shifted mid-strike. This time, the transformation came fully. The black wolf exploded from the man's skin. Enormous, scarred, magnificent, shaking silver ash from its fur as it met the dead beast in the air. The collision cracked the floor. For a heartbeat, awe overtook fear. This was the creature Marwyn had tried to bury for 15 years. Not mindless, not mad, terrible, yes, but not evil. A king's wolf, wounded and furious, defending the hall that had feared it. More shadows rose, too many. Kalen fought like a storm given teeth, but he was newly healed and not whole. Each dead wolf that touched him tore at the remaining scars around his soul. Elara felt every strike through the bond thread between them. She searched the broken runes, the blood, the moonbone dust, the old basin cracked by shattered archstone. Healing would not be enough. The dead were not wounded. They were trapped. Marwyn stood among them, chanting, face slick with rain and triumph. "You see?" she cried. "This is what lies beneath the throne. This is what your mercy unleashes." Elara understood then that Marwyn did not think herself evil. She thought herself the last wall against chaos. That made her more dangerous. People who believed themselves necessary could excuse any cruelty. Elara looked at the dead wolves and saw, not monsters, but generations of beasts denied death, denied freedom, forced to become chains for sons who never knew why their own souls hurt. The old line from the parchment burned through her mind. The wolf does not die where the hand of the moon remembers its name. Names, not power, not domination. Remembrance. Elara staggered toward the basin. A shadow wolf turned on her. Kalen saw and tried to break away, but two dead beasts dragged him down. Elara reached the basin as the shadow lunged. She cut her palm on a shard of moonstone and pressed her bleeding hand into the dry wolf mouth. "I do not know your names," she whispered to the dead, "but I know you were not born to be chains." The basin filled with silver light. Across the hall, every wolf shadow froze. Elara's blood spread through the old stone channels. Not red now, but luminous, carrying memory from the palace bones. Names rose into her mouth. Too many, ancient and aching. Theron, Male, Auric, Vael, Zoran. Kings, monsters, fathers, sons, boys crowned too young, wolves bound too tightly. She spoke them one by one, voice breaking, and with each name, a dead wolf lowered its head. Marwyn's chant faltered. "Stop," Elara continued. The court listened in stunned silence as the wolfless girl named the forgotten dead beneath the throne. The shadow wolves began to dissolve, not destroyed, but released, their forms rising like smoke toward the shattered ceiling where storm clouds parted to reveal the full moon. Kalen, bleeding in wolf form, lifted his head and watched them go. The last dead wolf was the largest, white where Kalen's was black, with the same scar at the throat. His father. Kalen shifted back to human without meaning to, falling to his knees. The white shadow approached him. The court held its breath. Kalen did not move as the dead king's wolf lowered its muzzle to his brow. Not command, not curse. Farewell. Then it turned to Elara and bowed. The moon took it. Marwyn screamed, a sound of grief and rage tangled together. With the dead released, the blood runes collapsed. Her power broke. Vespera stumbled free, sobbing into her father's arms. Guards surged forward, but Marwyn seized a fallen silver spear and drove it toward Elara's back. Kalen moved first. He crossed the hall with impossible speed, but Elara turned before he reached her. Not with fear, with sorrow. She lifted one blood-lit hand. The spear stopped inches from her chest, trembling in the air. Marwyn stared. Elara looked into the high healer's eyes and saw decades of fear. Choices made in candlelit rooms, children poisoned for the sake of order, mothers buried as warnings. I could sever your wolf from you, Elara said softly. Marwen's face went white. She was a healer, but wolf-blooded still. To lose the wolf was a living death. The court waited, hungry for punishment. A darker part of Elara understood that hunger. It would be so easy to satisfy it. So clean, so deserved. Kalen came to stand beside her, breathing hard, but he did not speak. He did not tell her to be merciful. He did not tell her to be cruel. He let the choice remain hers. Elara lowered her hand. The spear clattered to the floor. No, she said. I will not become what you feared. Marwen sagged with something like relief, but Elara was not finished. You will live with your wolf awake. You will feel every chain you forged, every wound you named protection, every cry you buried beneath the throne. Silver light wrapped around Marwen's wrists, not chains of metal, but memory. She collapsed, gasping, as the pain of the bound wolves she had maintained for years flooded back into her soul. It did not kill her. That was Elara's mercy. It did not spare her. That was Elara's justice. Kalen looked at Elara then, and whatever remained between them of pride, suspicion, and fear changed shape. Not vanished, changed. The court saw it. So did she. The Alpha King stood beside the wolfless girl not as a man bewitched, not as a ruler claiming a useful power, but as someone who had chosen, in full view of every enemy, to let her strength stand unowned. Dawn came gray and cold over a palace that no longer knew what kingdom it housed. The Hall of Crowns was ruined. The lunar arch lay in silver fragments. Rainwater pooled between broken runes. Nobles huddled in factions, whispering with the feverish urgency of people who had seen history tear open and did not yet know where to place themselves. Some wanted Marwen executed before sunrise. Some wanted Elara imprisoned until scholars could decide whether gratitude was safer than fear. Lord Morcant demanded assurances that his daughter's injury would not be forgotten. Vespra, pale and shaken, said nothing, which improved Elara's opinion of her more than any apology could have. Kalen ordered the hall cleared, the wounded treated, and Marwen confined under guard without silver. No silver? Lord Morcant snapped. After what she has done? Kalen's eyes cut to him. We are finished calling cruelty precaution, simply because it is convenient. The Lord bowed stiffly, hatred hidden beneath obedience. The command held this time. Every wolf in the hall felt it and yielded, Kalen noticed. So did the council. So did Elara. His wolf was not fully healed, but it was no longer dying. The difference changed the air around him. Before, Kalen's power had felt like a blade pressed to every throat. Now it felt like a storm beyond the mountains. Dangerous, immense, but no longer breaking itself apart to prove it existed. When the hall emptied, Elara remained near the cracked basin, one hand bandaged, body hollow with exhaustion. She had expected triumph, to feel warmer. Instead, she felt the terrible quiet after survival. When the soul finally realizes how close it came to ending. Kalen approached slowly, as if she were the dangerous one now. Perhaps she was. He had put his crown back on, but it sat differently. Or maybe she saw differently. You should be resting, he said. So should you. I am accustomed to ignoring healers. Then you have been poorly raised. A faint smile touched his mouth and vanished. It was not humor, not quite, but it was the first gentle thing to survive between them without immediately turning to pain. Silence settled. Elara looked at the throne. What happens now? The council will try to control the story by noon. By nightfall, 3 versions will reach the outer packs. In one, you are a witch who nearly destroyed me. In another, Marwen was a traitor, and nothing more. In the third, the old blood is returned, and the throne depends on it. Which one will you tell? The true one. That your court humiliated a girl it needed? That I did. Elara looked at him then. He did not flinch. Do you think truth will be enough? No. He stepped closer, stopping where the choice of distance still belonged to her. but it will be the first stone. Elara wanted to forgive him. The desire startled her because it was not simple, not soft. It came with anger still attached, with memory, with the ache of standing in gray before a laughing court. Forgiveness, she realized, was not a door one opened once. It was a road, and she was not ready to walk it quickly. "I will not be made Luna, because your counsel needs repair," she said. "I know. I will not be dressed in white and placed beside you, so the court can pretend it never spat at me. I know. And I will not let your wolf use me as a crutch." Kaelin's eyes warmed with something fierce. He would resent the implication. Despite herself, Elara almost smiled. Then the moment deepened, and his voice lowered. "Nor will I." He looked toward the ruined arch. "My wolf reached for you because you could save him. I reached for you because I did not know how to stop losing him. That is not love. Not yet. Need can disguise itself too well." Elara's breath caught. He was naming the danger before she had to. "Then, what is this?" Kaelin looked back at her, the beginning of earning the right to find out. The honesty undid her more than any declaration would have. She had feared he would kneel and call her mate before the court, turning one kind of erasure into another, from nothing to destiny, with no space for the woman between. Instead, he gave the bond room to become real or fail honestly. "Your wolf knew my name," she said. "Yes." "Do you?" The question struck him. Slowly, Kaelin lowered himself to one knee, not collapsing this time, choosing. The sight tightened Elara's throat, because the last time he had knelt, pain had forced him down. Now, intention did. "Elara Rowan," he said, voice carrying through the ruined hall, though no audience remained. "Daughter of Ceres, last known child of the lunar hand, healer of the forgotten dead, the woman I wronged before my kingdom, and will answer to before my kingdom. I know your name. I will spend whatever years you allow proving I know the person who carries it." Tears burned behind her eyes. She hated that they came now, after survival, after power, after the court had gone. But perhaps that was why. No one was watching. No one could use them. "Stand up," she whispered. "Not because you ask," he said carefully. "Because I am tired, and you are very tall when I am trying not to cry." He rose. For a moment they simply looked at one another. Two wounded things in the wreckage of a throne room, surrounded by the bones of old lies. Then Kaelin removed his cloak and placed it around her shoulders again. This time he waited before letting the fabric touch her, giving her time to refuse. She did not. The cloak settled warm and heavy, smelling of rain, smoke, and living wolf. The black wolf inside him stirred, not reaching now, only present. Elara felt it, and did not fear it. That was new too. The next 7 days tested them harder than the trial had. Public reversals were satisfying in songs because songs ended before politics began. In life, every revelation demanded payment. The royal council split in two. Lord Morcant argued that forbidden blood could not be permitted influence over the throne, while three border alphas declared that if Elara had truly restored the king's command, she was owed sanctuary under ancient law. The temple priestesses arrived from the Old Moon Road carrying sealed scrolls they claimed had been hidden since the purge. Half the court wanted those scrolls burned unread. Kaelin ordered them opened in daylight before witnesses. Their contents changed everything. Moon healers had not been witches. They had been oath-bound guardians of the bond between Alpha and Wolf, healers who could mend soul wounds caused by war, grief, poison, or madness. They had been granted status beneath the moon, independent of pack hierarchy, because their gift could not survive coercion. Then, 90 years before Kaelin's reign, a mad Alpha had tried to force a moon healer to bind his rival's wolves. She refused. He killed her. Her sisters severed his wolf in judgment. After that, kings feared them, councils envied them. Healers without moon blood resented them. History became accusation. Protection became purge. The line was hunted until only hidden daughters remained. Elara listened to the scrolls read aloud in the repaired council chamber, hands folded tightly in her lap. Every word resurrected her mother and buried her again. Kalen sat at the head of the table, silent, but his anger filled the room. Not wild anger, focused, useful. When Lord Morcant suggested the old independence laws were too dangerous to restore, Kalen looked at him and said, "Dangerous to whom?" No one answered. Meanwhile, Marwyn survived in the southern tower under guard, forced each dawn to wake with every wolf soul memory she had helped, bind pressing against her own. Elara visited her once. Kalen objected. Elara went anyway. Marwyn sat by a narrow window, hair unbound, face aged 10 years by pain and sleeplessness. She looked up when Elara entered. "Come to savor mercy?" "No." "Then why?" Elara placed a bowl of fever tea on the table. "Because cruelty is easier when the cruel person stays a monster." Marwyn laughed weakly. "You think understanding me will protect you?" "No. I think refusing to understand you would let you keep shaping me." Marwyn stared at the tea. "Your mother said something similar." Elara's chest tightened. "Tell me." For a long time, Marwyn said nothing. Then, perhaps because defeat had stripped away the usefulness of silence, she spoke of Saris Rowan arriving at the capital years ago under a false name, seeking records of the lunar hand. Marwyn had discovered what she was. Instead of exposing her, she warned her to flee. "I was not always certain," Marwyn said, looking out at the gray sky. "Fear becomes easier with practice." "Did you send word to Ashvin?" Elara asked. Marwyn closed her eyes. That was answer enough. She had not killed Saris, but she had helped build the walls that trapped her. Elara left without forgiveness. She also left without hatred sharp enough to cut her own hands. That, she decided, was a beginning. During those same days, Kalen's courtship of trust began not with flowers, jewels, or declarations, but with records. He restored Elara's pact claim under royal protection, then gave her the document and said, "This is yours, whether you stay or leave." He returned her mother's surviving registry page, framed in silver wood but without glass, because he said holy things should not be sealed away from touch. He ordered the old moon chamber cleansed of ward ash and reopened as a healing sanctuary, then asked Elara what should be done with it. Asked, not commanded. Each act mattered. None erased the hall. Elara let him know that. One evening, as winter sunlight burned red through the western windows, he found her in the sanctuary sorting herbs with the same practical focus she had used in Ashvin. "The outer packs are sending wounded," he said. "Word travels quickly when pain hears there is somewhere to go." "And the council?" "Terrified." "Good." His mouth curved slightly. "I thought you might say that." She glanced at him. "Do not look pleased. I am still angry with you." "I know. I may be angry for a long time. Then I will have to develop patience." "Do Alpha Kings do that?" "Rarely. It will impress the historians." She should not have smiled. She did, just enough that he saw it, and looked away as if the sight hurt. Not unpleasantly. Hungrily, perhaps, but not with possession. With hope he did not trust himself to touch. The air changed. Elara felt the thread between them, no longer a desperate pull, but a quiet awareness. Kalen stood across the table, hands behind his back like a man restraining himself from reaching for warmth too soon. "My wolf dreams now," he said. "Of what?" "A forest with moonlight on black water, and you walking ahead where he cannot quite follow." Elara's fingers stilled over the herbs. "Does that trouble you?" "Everything about you troubles me." He said it so solemnly she almost laughed. Then his eyes met hers, but less like a threat now. "And more like?" "A door I do not deserve to open." The words settled between them, intimate and dangerous. Elara looked down first. "Deserving is not the same as earning. Then I will earn slowly." Outside, a wolf howled in the courtyard, not in pain, but in recognition of the moon rising. Others answered. For the first time since Elara entered the capital, the sound did not make her feel excluded. It did not make her feel whole either, but it made space around the silence in her chest, as if wolfless did not mean empty after all. It meant room for something older. The final challenge came from Ashvin. It was inevitable, though Elara had hoped her old pack would choose cowardice over ambition. On the 8th night after the trial, 3 riders arrived beneath the palace gates, carrying Ashvin's black pine banner and a petition sealed by Alpha Garone, the man who had handed Elara to the crown as a burden. He requested formal audience, claiming ancestral right over Elara Rowan as a daughter of Ashvin, and demanded that any honor, status, or protection granted to her be negotiated through her birth pack. The court saw the opportunity at once. Lord Morcant supported the petition. If Ashvin reclaimed her, Elara's independence weakened. Her bloodline could be managed through pack law. Marriage alliances could be arranged. Duties imposed. Gratitude extracted. Kaelin read the petition in silence, then handed it to Elara before the assembled council. "Your answer?" he asked. The room stiffened. Alpha Garin, broad-shouldered and gray-bearded, stood near the council doors with 2 sons behind him. Elara remembered those sons throwing snowballs packed with stones at her when she was 11. They looked at her now with new calculation, as if the word moon healer had painted value over the face they once ignored. "She is Ashvin, born," Garin said. "Our pack suffered the burden of raising her. If the crown now recognizes power in her blood, Ashvin must be restored for its years of sacrifice." Sacrifice. Elara let the word pass through her. It found no place to land. "You sent me away with no cloak," she said. Garen's face reddened. "You asked the crown to release you from responsibility, because we were misled about your nature." "No," Elara said quietly. "You were honest about yours." The council went silent. Garon's sons shifted uneasily. Kaelin watched from the head of the table, expression unreadable, but the black wolf inside him was very still. This was not his battle unless she made it so. He understood. Garin tried a different tactic. "Child, whatever harshness passed between us, Ashvin was your home. Blood should return to blood." Elara thought of her mother's books burning. She thought of winter nights in the herb shed. She thought of being useful enough to summon, never enough to embrace. "Blood did return," she said. "My mother returned from saving your life, and you let your healer burn what remained of her." Garin flinched. So he did remember. "Good. You owe Ashvin nothing?" Lord Morcant asked sharply. Elara turned to him. "I owe Ashvin the truth." She faced the room. Let the record show that Ashvin Pack released Elara Rowan publicly before the crown, surrendered claim, protection, and kinship, and did so without coercion. Let the record also show that Moon Healer blood cannot be owned by birth pack, marriage bond, royal decree, council petition, or debt invented after power is discovered. The temple priestess standing near the wall lifted her head. "That is the old law." Elara looked at Kylon. "Will the crown honor it?" The question was a blade and a bridge. If he said no, everything he had promised cracked. If he said yes, he surrendered any legal claim over the power that had saved him. Kaelin rose. "The crown will restore it." Lord Morcant surged to his feet. "Majesty, that would place her outside pack command. Yes. Outside council appointment. Yes. Outside even your authority." Kaelin's eyes did not leave Elara. "Yes." The room erupted. Garin shouted. Morcant argued. Vespera, still pale from her ordeal, surprised everyone by standing and saying, "Enough." Her father stared at her. She lifted her bandaged arm. "I was raised to believe a crown was the highest thing a woman could touch. I nearly died, because everyone in this room wanted to use someone else to reach it." Her gaze moved to Elara, not warm, but clear. Let the old law stand. That did not make Vespera a friend. It made her something more interesting. A woman who had seen the machinery from inside and chosen, at least once, not to feed it. The vote that followed did not matter. Kaelin's decree did. By nightfall, Elara Rowan was recognized as the first free moon healer in 90 years, answerable to oath, moon, and conscience, not pack or crown. Ashvin left humiliated, its banner lowered, its claim broken before witnesses. Elara felt no savage joy watching Garen depart. Satisfaction, yes. Relief, yes. But revenge, she realized, was not always the enemy's ruin. Sometimes, it was simply standing where they could no longer reach you. Later she found Kaelin on the rain-dark balcony, overlooking the courtyard where he had once knelt in agony. He stood, without armor, crown absent, black hair loose in the wind. "You gave up authority over me today," she said. "I restored what should never have been taken." "That is not the same thing." "No." He looked at her. It was harder. She joined him at the railing, leaving a careful space between them. Below, wolves moved through the torchlit yard, their bodies silvered by moonlight. "Why?" she asked. "Because part of me wanted the right to keep you safe." "And the other part?" "Understood. Safety that depends on ownership is only a prettier cage." Elara looked at him then, really looked. The cruel king from the hall was not gone. That history would always exist. But before her now stood a man actively fighting the instincts that had once made cruelty easy. That mattered. It did not absolve. It mattered. The wind lifted her hair, and Kaelin's gaze followed the movement before he forced it back to her eyes. "I thought," he said slowly, "when my wolf healed, the mate bond might strike like lightning. Songs favor violence. And did it?" His mouth softened. "No, it came like a wound, learning warmth." Elara's heart beat once, hard. "That sounds painful." "It is." "Good." He huffed a quiet breath. "You have become fond of saying that." She looked out at the moon. "Pain is not always punishment. Sometimes it means feeling has returned." Kaelin was silent long enough that she felt him absorbing the words. Then he said, "May I ask something selfish?" "You may ask. I may refuse." "Fair." He turned fully toward her. "When the court is settled, when the sanctuary is yours, when no law binds you to stay, will you still walk in this palace?" Elara could have answered quickly. She did not. She thought of leaving, of roads beyond the capital, of villages where no one knew her name. Freedom opened before her, terrifying in its vastness. She also thought of the old moon chamber, filling with wounded wolves, of temple scrolls waiting to be read, of Kaelin standing beside her without touching what he had not earned. "I do not know," she said. Pain crossed his face, but he nodded. "Then I will make the palace worthy of being one of your choices." That answer stayed with her long after she returned to the sanctuary. Winter broke 3 weeks later, beneath a full moon so bright, the palace roofs shone like bone. The kingdom gathered again in the Hall of Crowns, not for a rejection, not for a trial, but for the first open moon rite, since the truth of the lunar hand had been restored. The hall had been repaired, but not remade. Kaelin ordered the broken stones of the old lunar arch set into the floor around the new healing basin, so the court would have to step carefully over the memory of what it had done. Elara approved. Some scars should remain visible. Nobles arrived wary, resentful, curious, afraid. Border alphas came with wounded wolves and guarded hope. Temple priestesses stood in a white circle near the basin. Marwen, under guard, was brought not to be displayed, but to witness the law she had tried to bury return without her permission. Ashvin was not invited. Elara entered without gray, without chains, without anyone's cloak over her shoulders. She wore deep blue, the color of the sky just before moonrise, simple and unadorned except for her mother's registry page folded into a small silverwood locket at her throat. The court watched her walk the same black stone path she had once crossed barefoot in shame. This time, no one laughed. Kaelin waited at the foot of the throne steps, not on the throne. His crown rested on the seat behind him. When Elara reached the basin, he bowed. Not a king's shallow acknowledgement. A true bow, witnessed by every alpha in the realm. Murmurs stirred, but no one dared mock. Elara looked at him, remembering rain, cruelty, pain, wolf shadow, apology, and every careful day between. "Your Majesty," she said. "Elara," he answered. Not title, name. The temple priestess began the rite, but it was Elara who spoke the oath. Her voice did not tremble. The moon healer's hand does not belong to throne, council, pack, or mate. It binds no wolf against its will. It heals no king for conquest. It severs only chains made by cruelty. It remembers the wounded, the hidden, and the dead. As she spoke, wolves throughout the hall lowered their heads, not forced, choosing. Kaelin's black wolf appeared behind him in shadow and moonlight, no longer pierced, no longer starving, still scarred, always scarred. It looked at Elara with the same recognition as before, but steadier now, no desperation in it. Then, before the entire court, the Alpha King removed a blade from his belt and cut his palm. A ripple of alarm passed through the nobles. Blood oaths were dangerous things. He let his blood fall into the basin, but did not reach for Elara's hand. "I owe a debt," he said. "Not of ownership, not of claim, of witness." His eyes lifted to the court. "Before this kingdom, I name what I did. I saw a woman without a wolf and mistook silence for lack. I used my power to make her smaller. I gave others permission to harm her. The debt for that cannot be paid in one apology, one decree, or one public bow." He looked at Elara then. "So I do not ask the moon healer to absolve me. I ask the kingdom to remember." The hall was silent enough to hear the basin water ripple. Elara felt the old wound in her chest answer. Not healed completely, but seen. That was a kind of medicine, too. She stepped forward and cut her own palm, letting one drop of moonlit blood fall beside his. The basin flared silver. Gasps rose as water climbed into the air, forming the shape of two wolves, one black, one white, circling without chains between them. A mate bond shimmered at the edge of Elara's senses, not snapping shut, not devouring, not demanding, waiting, offering. She looked at Kaelin. He had gone very still. Hope and fear warred openly across his face. "Do you feel it?" he asked softly. "Yes." His breath caught. "I will not claim it before you do." Elara believed him. That was the miracle. Not the moonfire, not the kneeling wolves. Trust, small and living, where humiliation had once stood. She extended her uncut hand. Kaelin stared at it, as if it were more dangerous than any battlefield. Then he took it. The bond warmed, not like lightning, but like dawn entering a room long sealed. The court watched, expecting perhaps a kiss, a dramatic declaration, a queen crowned in one breath. Elara gave them something stronger. She turned to face them with Kaelin's hand in hers and said, "I was not made powerful because a king finally saw me. I was powerful when none of you did. Remember that too." This time, when the wolves bowed, even the alphas followed. Not all willingly, not all with love, but they bowed because the world had changed, and their bodies knew before their pride did. Kaelin lowered himself beside her, one knee to the stone, not in weakness, not in pain, but in devotion earned through surrender. The thumbnail moment the court would remember for generations was not the rejection, not the trial, not even the moonfire. It was the Alpha King kneeling beside the girl he had once cast out, while she stood with silver eyes and a healer's blood burning brighter than any crown. That night, long after the court dispersed and the moon climbed high above the restored sanctuary, Elara returned to the courtyard where rain had once